Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Damien with Rosieside Farm. It's time for our market farm update. It is June 19th, 2023. So we're starting in the back of the garden, and what we have back here are some volunteer ground cherries that are really starting to come up. Now, we planted ground cherries last year, and they grew great, but they were very hard to harvest because they were just planting them too close together. So some have reseeded themselves in the holes. So we're just gonna let them do their thing. Coming to our row of tomatoes. We have some damage here, broken tomato plant, because I have not tied these up yet. That is a project for today, to get these tied up on the trellis before I see any more damage. You're gonna see a lot of like tomato garbage around here, like because I did a major pruning and haven't cleaned all that stuff up yet. But these tomatoes are kind of growing a little wild. I've got to get them trellised up and maybe do some more pruning. But there are plenty of tomatoes all over these plants, and these were our third succession. So these are the ones that have been in the ground the least amount of time. Coming up to our zucchini and squash. We picked our first zucchini and squash yesterday, took them to the farmer's market, very few of them. And these are mainly for our own consumption. And the tomatillos that are growing in between them, it's working out pretty good. They're starting to put on their tomatillos and starting to get some production out of these plants. Now this is a section that is shaded pretty well from that tree. So we have nothing planted here right now, but we will. I'll plant something in there. And we're coming down to our tomatoes. And here I started just another succession of tomato plants. So I've got some brandywines, very young brandywines in the ground. So hopefully, in a few months, when other tomatoes have run their course, those will be producing. We have a row of eggplant, peppers and tomatoes. And again, these tomato plants are really putting off a tremendous amount of tomatoes right now. Probably a few weeks before we get them ready to pick. But our jalapeno plants, we're getting flowers. I haven't really seen any jalapenos growing yet. But I'm sure they're coming. The eggplants, looks like there's some bug pressure, but we had that last year as well, and everything was fine. But our tomatoes, pretty lush. I mean, just look at all these tomatoes here, all over the vine. You'll see all the, I pruned the heck out of these tomatoes, so there's stuff all over the ground, which I've got to get cleaned up. That is today's project. And I planted a few more younger eggplants, and I'm going to be putting more in the ground today. Looks like we have lost some peppers here in this area. One little pepper holding on at the end. From here on are our white tomatoes, who've been experiencing a lot of leaf curl. So I pruned them. I pruned them more than everything else. And they're getting a little bit better, but I mean, and they're putting on tomatoes, but they're right next to the beefsteak, which aren't putting on any curl at all. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. A volunteer tomato, and here's our lone pepper plant here. It looks like we lost a few before, but we got a pepper. So we're heading down to our first cucumber trellis and peppers. And this, I'm telling you, this is the worst weed in the world. This weed coming up between the fabric cloth has got razor blade thorns on it. I mean, razor blades, they're terrible. But our lady bells here, I mean, we're putting on peppers. Our cucumbers are starting to climb up the trellis. There's a little cucumber right there underneath. So things are looking up. We have another Lady Bell here that's, gosh, got 3 peppers on it right now. So just allowing them to grow. This trellis of tomatoes, I did not prune. These are some cherry tomatoes, some golden nuggets. And like I said, they were not the first tomatoes to go in. This is the later succession. There are tomatoes everywhere. These are called spoon tomatoes. So they're extremely tiny. And they just don't look very cooperative with the trellis. They kind of grow everywhere. They kind of sprawl. So it looks like this section's just going to be a little bit of a mess, and we'll deal with that. It's no big deal. So our line of peppers, our line of tomatoes. These are our big fat red tomatoes that we don't know exactly what they're called. They're putting on growth. We've got peppers everywhere. It looks like there's a pepper I stepped on while I was tying up in a tomato plant that the string broke that I tied up, so I got to fix that today. So a lot of cleanup in the garden today. Our black Krim tomatoes, I mean, they're just everywhere. Moving over to the okra. Looks like we got some bug damage here on okra. But we found okra is pretty resilient. So it's growing. I have seen some little okra. There we go. Like a little okra getting ready to grow. Plant some white eggplant. So here's one white eggplant that's growing pretty well. There's another. But there were some where that's a patch of weeds. That's a patch of weeds. So I have some more white eggplant. I might come clean this up a little bit better. Get a good patch of white eggplant in here. And then the sea of tomatillos. That tomatillos should be trellised. I'm not trellising these. It's too late. I don't have the material to do it. But they're growing pretty well. It's the first year we've ever grown tomatillos. And they're putting on fruit. Volunteer tomatoes. We have our marigolds that are around our second cucumber trellis. I planted some bushing beans out here, just kind of fill in the space. Planted by seed, and they're coming up. These cucumbers got a little while to go before they start putting off fruit. Of course, our volunteer tomatoes as always, and trellis of cucumbers I just put in recently, succession wise. They go all the way to this T-post. Then I have a portion of trellis that I need to secure down, and then I'm going to plant some more cucumbers there probably today. A couple volunteer tomatoes, of course, putting off a lot of fruit. So we sell plant starts at the farmer's market, and that we did really well for us when we first started out. That's starting to die. Our sales basically cut in half or more because it's June. People have put in their gardens. We're still selling stuff here and there. We still have 149 days to our first frost here in Zone 7B. So you can plant whatever you want and you're still going to get a harvest, but it's just really slow. So we're in a transition phase here between plant starts and produce. So a lot of our plant starts I'm going to start putting in the garden. So, I mean, they don't go to waste. We're probably going to end up dumping, 50 tomato plants in the compost pile. There's just no place to put them, and we don't need 200 tomato plants in the ground. But I'm going to get some white eggplant, have some habaneros, have some California wonders, have some different things that that we can put in the ground now for our own harvest. So when we start and transition over to produce, we'll have more to offer. So thanks for checking out the garden update. There'll be one next week. See you next time.